Okay, let's try this without recording. Maybe that'll help. So far, OBS isn't complaining. So, anyway, all right, we are going to start with March 15th. So you can see here, I have 17 images, and I'm going to pick which ones I'm going to actually edit. So I like to go through and see which ones look the most interesting to me, which ones I actually want to work on. That one is interesting for some reason, of course, or I wouldn't have made the photo. In fact, it's more interesting than the next one. So I'll flag that one to edit. This one I would have liked better if I had been able to get closer before the scene changed. So what I could do, of course, is crop it, but I would be cropping out most of the photo. It's not too much of a problem because I am shooting with a full frame DSLR, but I would lose a lot of the detail by doing that. You know, the more you crop, the less detail you have on the resulting image because you're cropping to a much smaller section of the sensor. So I think I'm going to bypass that one. I mean, I'm not deleting it from my hard drive, so it will be there if at some point in the future I go back and I'm looking through this folder and I see that photo and it captures my eye again. I can always go back and edit it then. I'm definitely going to edit this one. This is another photo I took specifically for the backlighting and the silhouette of the trees. Choosing this one as well. I was very excited to be able to get this shot of this person on the bus without them changing their position or anything. I specifically wanted that pose that they have. But this photo I was shooting from the hip. I had set my aperture to, is it f8 or f11? F8. So I had set my aperture to f8. I had focused on the middle distance, and that way I wouldn't have to specifically aim for a particular person or even be looking at the viewfinder if I didn't want to be in order to see. I could just point it and shoot it as I saw people walk into the frame of focus. So that's how I was able to capture her. I'll capture this person. I've been trying to avoid using gender-specific pronouns when I refer to individuals that I don't know because I don't know what they identify as. And so I'd rather not assume and just say they or them. You know, respects the fact that different people have different pronouns. And if one of the people who I did photograph ever happened to see the stream, I would hate for them to see the video and I misgendered them in any way. So I try to keep it neutral. Just a small thing that I can do to help support our transgender members of society. A little bit of respect goes a long, long way. Now I have two shots of this, and I'm not sure. Okay, I like the second one better. I have it centered a little bit better, so I will go with that one. forgot to tell my Twitter people that I'm live. Let me go ahead and do that now while I'm thinking about it. I will pull up Twitter now on my other monitor. I gotta make sure I pull up the right account. I have 4 Twitter accounts. Well, one of them for photography. Okay, and I'm simply W Lotus on Twitter, in case you want to find me there. Has anyone else noticed that they've changed the Twitter login screen? It's been changed for a while, but I don't like that you have to go to 2 different screens to log in. One screen you enter your password, no, one screen you enter your username, and that screen you enter your password. It's just an extra step, and it's a pain in the butt, quite honestly. Let my Twitter people. I am live now on twitch.tv/Wanda the Lotus, editing my most recent street photos. Let me tag that photography lovers. Okay. Send that, please. Thank you. Okay. Awesome. Okay, OBS seems happier now. So basically what I need to do is stream, but not record. I'll just download the VOD from Twitch when I'm done, so that I can have it for my own archives. Yep, it's saying that I have an excellent connection, no dropped frames. So let's move to the next photo. Let's see if this one can. This one didn't come out focused well enough. I wasn't close enough to have them in my field of focus, so I won't bother with that one. Now this one I may be able to get away with, and I like it because of this person here. Now they're not looking right into the lens, but I just like the fact that they're looking forward. That might be a nice one to save, to share to my Instagram account. I'll see how it looks after I finished editing it. Oh, this one didn't. This one came in out of focus. It looks like I got some camera shake on this. Unless the focusing wasn't, unless the focusing was that off, I might have changed the focus on this one. No, the shutter speed is 1/80th of a second, so, but I might have been moving the camera. Like I said, I was shooting from the waist. Did I get more than one shot at that point? I didn't. I may have to crop up some things. I like it because it's in focus, but I may have to crop out some things in order to get it to look as interesting as I found it. I'm definitely keeping this one because of the framing. I used the underside of the bridge to frame the people who are waiting at the crosswalk. I remember really wanting this shot, but I don't believe, no, I didn't get it in focus enough to salvage. I mean, I probably could still use it. I've seen photos in exhibits that weren't perfectly in focus, so it's not that big of a deal. It's more about the statement that the photo makes. but I don't think so for this one. What could I have done to improve it? I could have made more than one shot. Um, I also could have moved a little bit further to the left so that the person who is um, looking like they're about to lift some of these items off the ground was more in the frame and not so much hidden by the side of this entryway. Ooh, I have a oatmeal raisin cookie calling my name. I'm going to flag this one, and I'm also going to grab my cookie. 1 second. Ooh, oatmeal raisin cookie. Yum yum. Okay, so I am going to flag this one. Not that one. There's really nothing in the foreground to make this interesting. This one is interesting though. As you see someone on a motorized bike on the sidewalk. It's not safe, but it's also been a reality here in New York City for quite a few years now. They could probably get a ticket too if there was a cop there. And again, there's nothing in the foreground in this one to make it interesting, so I'm gonna bypass that one. Excuse me. Okay, so that's the last one from the 15th of March. So these 10 are what I will be working with. Let's start with this one. And I'll sharpen it just a touch. Straighten it just a touch. And then we will crop it. Got to straighten it again. It over straightened. There we go. That's better. Looks like someone destroyed this rental bike's front wheel. Brighten it up some. No, it's not as in focus as I would like for it to be, but it's still interesting. You see all these abandoned bikes. You see an abandoned bike and four abandoned scooters. Well, some cropping may help this. Following the rule of thirds, I'm going to put the bike in the foreground, right at the intersection of the right corner and the right third and the bottom third of the frame. That looks more interesting. I'm going to slide it so that the bike in the bottom is a little bit further to the right. Can probably crop it just a touch more. See, because the bike and the scooters are the focus of the shot. So if I can crop out as many distracting elements without cropping out so much that I lose a sense of time and place, that's the sweet spot of cropping it. Right. That looks better. This will benefit from black and white. Yes, it will. That removes the colors so that you don't have the colors as a distraction now. And with that, I can probably bump the exposure up a little bit more. Like so. That is great. That is just the way I want it. That's what I saw in my head when I made the shot. Okay, next. Ah, yes, definitely black and white, because this is a silhouette shot. Go ahead and sharpen it. Raise the exposure just a touch, so I can see some of the details in the foreground, but not many details. And this is a patterns and textures shot. Can go in that series. So I'll keyword it patterns and textures. And I also want to keyword it under my nature keywords as a tree. Okay. That one of the trees is probably going on my Instagram. This, however, is going on my Patreon. Okay. Let's start with simple things. A little bit of sharpening. And a little bit of cropping. We've got too much dead space on the left-hand side. It's not really what I'm looking for this shot. I really want focus to be on the individual. So I'm gonna remove as much of that empty space as I can get away with without cropping out too much of the person. Like so. Put the exposure. I think you can do it a little bit more sharpening too. And like I've explained before, sharpening does not make a photo more in focus. Sharpening increases the contrast of the edges in the image, between the edges and everything around it. So it does give the illusion of the photo being more in focus. But the photo, for the most part, has to be in focus before you apply sharpening. Or what you're going to end up with are very, very big blurry edges made very contrasty against the rest of the photo, and it's not going to look good. It's I'll say, I don't really like the term, but I will say that's an amateur move, and I don't like that term only because it's generally used in a very condescending way, to say, oh, you don't know what you're doing. um, by amateur, I mean, everybody has to start somewhere. Nobody came out of the womb knowing everything about photography and how to edit photos. So I don't mean it in a condescending way. I do mean it in the sense that, in general, when people are just learning photography and they're learning how to focus and they're learning how to process photos after after they've made them, and they may or may not be as well in focus as they would have liked, the easy thing to do is to bump up the sharpening. And over time, you learn, just like I've learned, that that's not going to make the photo look, if the photo is already out of focus, that's not going to make the photo look any better. Now, it can be used for artistic purposes. I personally, that's not my artistic style, but there may be photographers out there who will make photos that are out of focus, and then they'll deliberately apply heavy sharpening for the artistic value of it. That would actually be very interesting to experiment with. If I remember, I may have to try that out just to see, just to see what it looks like. But it is a personal choice that every artist has to make for themselves. This right here is my type of photo, just like the previous one. Pardon my munching. I'm almost done with my cookie. Now, in this case, I don't know how much, if any, of the surrounding area I'd like to crop. Let's experiment. So, photo is more interesting with a sense of place, so I don't want to crop out too much of the background, or there'll be no sense of place. I do like this though, because this crop gets rid of the distracting text on the right side of the image. You can also bring it in on the left to get rid of the text on that other side. Text can be distracting if it's not a central part of the image. So that very simple crop, you can see I still have probably 4/5 of the photo left. I cropped very little, and it brings the main subject, which is a person pushing the shopping cart, more to the forefront of the photo. Definitely my kind of shot, and also definitely going on Patreon. I'll put the link to my Patreon account in the comments. Would help if I spelled it correctly. Join Team LLFA at patreon.com/wlotus. So anybody who is a member of Team LLFA will see posts from me 3 times a week. The last post of the week always goes public a month later, but 2 out of the 3 remain private, and only Team LLFA members can see those photos. It's a lot of fun to get people's commentary, especially if it's a photo they particularly like. And then once a month, the my favorite image from the previous month gets sent out on a postcard to all of the Team LLFA members. This week I just sent out March postcards. I sent them out at the beginning of the week, so they're probably in people's hands already. I hope that they enjoyed them. That image was a particular favorite of mine, and it's one that had not yet appeared in my Patreon post. So it was a special surprise for the members of Team LLFA. In case you don't know, LLFA stands for Lotuslandfineart. That is my business name. I am registered with my local county as a registered business, sole proprietor. And that's the name that I use on the internet for my fine art photography. So if you want to check out my my main gallery, you would go to lotuslandfineart.com, which is now in the chat, and there you'll find my artist statement, my CV, my street photography, my one photo a month for the past several years. And you'll also find links to my blog as well as to Team LLFA. So visit that site, bookmark it. You can even contact me through the contact form on the site if you want to. And I do believe there are links to my other socials on that website. All right, now this one I am torn, because the red really makes a statement because of the past usage of this box. This used to be an alarm box where you could alert the fire department, alert the police department if you needed help in that area. So the red definitely serves a purpose there. But black and white allows you to see, of course, more of the textures. Let me bump up the exposure, brighten it up. And I think I'm going to leave this one black and white. And I'm also going to increase the blacks so you get it really nice. You get the texture nice and contrasty. And this one could probably benefit from some vignetting. So let's make the vignetting very strong. And we want to increase the size. What does ratio do? Let's find out. Oh, I want to make the vignetting more of an oval. So we'll do it like that. Move the brightest part of the vignette a little bit to the right, and then I can take the strength back down. But I want it a little stronger than this, I think. There. So that really draws the viewer's eye to the broken panel on the front of this former call box. Oh, do you know, I had never done the sharpening, and I can see a difference. Now, this photo was already in focus. Let me zoom in. So this photo is already in focus. This is with the sharpening off. When I turn the sharpening on, it looks like the photo came more into focus, and that's because for the most part the photo was already in focus. So by increasing the contrast of the edges found in the image, then it helps to bring out the detail in the photo. That's what sharpening does. So this is without sharpening. You can see the edges in the photo are not as distinct, and then with sharpening, the edges are more distinct. And in a photo like this, where it was already in focus, then it gives the illusion of the photo being even more in focus than it was previously. So that's how sharpening works. This is going to be, do I want this in my street photo? Yeah, I'll leave it in the street photography. This one is definitely a textures and patterns study. So I'll make sure to keyword it as such. And it's probably going to end up going on my Instagram. Since I've been doing more street photos that involve people and more close-ups of people, not macro close-ups, but having a person pretty much fill the frame, or a couple of people pretty much fill the frame. I like to save those for Patreon because that's the that's a specialty. Where with patterns and textures, I like to share those more on my public facing social media, just to share with people how my photographer's eye works. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Oh, this was the one that I wasn't so, that I wanted to keep because I found it interesting, but I wasn't so sure how nice it would look because it's not in focus. So let me zoom into this one so that you can see that this is with sharpening off. This is with sharpening on, and you can see the photo is no more in focus than it was before. It's just the edges are darker now, they're more contrasty. And even if I bump up the sharpenings, the photo is no more in focus, but you get a lot more grain. And it's grainier because, in this case, the photo wasn't in focus to begin with. So by sharpening all of the edges found in the image, it makes the grain in the photo really, really stand out. Every photo has grain, some a little bit more than others, some a little bit less than others. It depends on the ISO of, if you're using a film camera, it depends on the ISO of the film that you're using. If you're using a digital camera, it depends on the ISO setting of your camera. Whether you have a lot of grain or a little grain, most often depends on your personal artistic choice. If you're shooting at a higher speed ISO, the higher the number, the higher the speed of the ISO. So the higher the number of the ISO, the more grainy the photo is going to be. I believe I was shooting at ISO 400 this day. Let's check the metadata. Yes, I was shooting at ISO 400 because it was a bright day and I wanted to be able to shoot from the hip and not worry about camera shake. So I knew that shooting it at ISO 400, even while I was moving, would still pretty much stop the action. Not always, but it would pretty much stop the action for whatever I was shooting. So in this case, I was shooting in shadow. So my shutter speed's around probably, oh, here it's at 1/500th of a second. So it was exposing probably for the bright background. But that means that the blurriness of the photo is not due to camera shake. It's because the shutter speed was too fast. It's just due to my camera not being focused. I had probably focused, I was probably shooting based off of the focus that I used for this image, which was fine for shooting something right in front of me. But when I went back to shooting like 10 feet in front of me, that focus no longer worked. So that's why this image came out a little bit blurry. The blur was due to it being out of focus. Now I want to crop this some to fill more of the frame with the person walking towards me, and leave some of the background. This is good enough to go on, say, my Instagram account. And I hope that I remember to put a bit of an explanation about why I find it interesting, in spite of the fact that it's not completely in focus and so on. It does need to be straightened a little bit more. No, that's it. That looks better. And how about the exposure? Now, one thing that I have found with images that are out of focus, because you don't have nice sharp edges, bumping up the exposure too much will cause you to lose the image. You'll lose a lot of your foreground in the background. So you can see here, especially in this case, because the background is lit more brightly than the foreground, I bumped up the exposure to 1.7, and I'm losing some of the detail. Like, the viewer's eye is going to be drawn to the blown out highlights in the back more than their eye would be drawn to the person in the front walking towards the camera. So if I take the exposure back down and bump it up just slightly, because again, I'm dealing with a photo that's not well focused. So I bump the exposure up just slightly, just enough so that you can clearly see the person walking towards the camera. The viewer's eye is still going to get drawn to the blown out highlights in the back, unless of course I can recover some of those highlights. So let's increase the highlight range. And what happens when I pull up? I'm getting some of the details back in the sign. Probably let's do more of the highlight range. Okay, so as the highlight range goes up, it gets rid of some of the contrast between the background and the foreground, and I don't want that. The highlight recovery value. I'm going to leave the highlights as they are. Since the image is out of focus, I don't have as much leeway to play with in terms of adjusting the highlights and getting details back, because a lot of details are missing. Not because of the exposure. A lot of the details are missing because the image is out of focus. But like I said, I find the composition of the image interesting enough that in spite of it being slightly out of focus, I'm going to keep it. So let's tag this as street photography. And let's go on to the next one. Okay, this is the one that I said I would like to work with it to see if cropping it will get more of what I want out of this image. Because I know what I saw in my mind, and this is not quite it. So let's straighten it a little bit. Great, great. And crop out some of the distracting elements on the left-hand side. this is what I end up with. And I like this much better because these two individuals here are who I was really focusing on. You can see from the histogram in the upper right hand corner, the photo is, I'll say, underexposed, only because it's not as bright as I would like it to be. There really is no such thing as underexposed or overexposed. It depends on the photographer's intention. So this might be overexposed for some photographers. Some photographers might want the image to be darker like this. It depends on what you're trying to portray. For me, this photo is underexposed. I want more light on the subjects. So I'm going to bump the exposure up. Not too much, but enough that I can get them as bright as I'd like. I want to increase the black point a little bit. If you look at the histogram again and look at the far left side of the histogram, that shows you the level that the blacks are at. And we do have blacks because the histogram goes all the way to the left, but we don't have much. So I'm going to slide the blacks a little bit further to the left, and what that does is darken the blacks in the image and give you a little bit more contrast without moving the white point. I've learned to be careful with that. When I first started shooting, my photos were very contrasty. I loved that look. And over time, I wanted to see more detail even in the blacks. The higher you make the blacks, the higher you make the whites, the more details you lose in each of those extremes. So I've learned to use a lighter touch with how much I bump up the blacks and how much I bump up the highlights. Yeah, in fact, as much as I've bumped the black slider up, for my own preferences, I've lost some of the detail in this handle. So if I take this down, right down to 0, and if I take it up to, say, 4, and it's a very subtle change. You might not even be able to see it on the video, but it's a very subtle change that I'm able to see on my laptop screen. This may do well with some vignetting as well. So I'm going to enable the vignetting. What I do is put the strength at 100% so I can clearly see the boundaries of the vignette. And then I know what I'm doing as I'm adjusting things like the shape and adjusting where the center of the vignette is. That's harder for me to see if the strength is not at 100%. And then once I have things positioned the way I want, I can take the strength back down to the default, and then if I want to, I can darken or lighten it just a touch. I don't want to darken it too much because I don't want the line of the vignette to show in the image when I export it. I can see a little bit of the line there. At 10%, then the line almost disappears. So that is good enough for me. And let's see if I put the exposure up just a little bit more. You can see the histogram moving towards the right as I increase the exposure. And that's a decent image to work with. It's not my favorite because the woman in the foreground is not as in focus as I would prefer, but it's still a decent image. I'm definitely going to keep it. Let's see, did I flag my other ones? Have I been adding my purple flag? Anything? Yes, I have. My purple flags are what I use, so that's my fine art photography, street photography flag. So anything that is flagged purple, that's Lotusland Fine Art stuff. this is another one that would do with some cropping and some straightening. Definitely want this one to be in black and white. I want to get the two people who are about to cross the street more in the center of the frame. That's great. And you can see this isn't well in focus either. I was shooting from a distance, so I wasn't. They were outside of the frame of focus that I had set at that point. But that's okay. We deal with what we have. Let's increase the exposure just a little bit. That's too much. And most likely this will go on my Instagram as well. Because with Instagram, the images are smaller. The smaller the image, the more pleasing it is when the image is not perfectly focused, as is the case with this one. I think this is probably the best I'm going to be able to do with this one. Because as I said before, when the image is not well focused, you don't have as much latitude, or at least in my experience, I don't have as much latitude with changing things like the contrast and so on. So this is probably about as good as it's going to get. I want to play around with it just a little bit more. If you look on the far right side of the histogram, you can see how the highlights are way blown out, and that would be everything in the background on the left side of the image. So outside from underneath this overpass, which is an elevated train line, there's no details in that background. Everything is blown out. So if I lower the exposure some, and then let's fiddle around with the highlights, let's see if I can get any of those details back. So you can see some of the details in the background are coming back, as there's what looks like trees back behind the street sign, but it also makes the foreground darker. So all of this is trade-offs. It's all connected, so if you change one thing, it's going to affect something else. So it's up to you, the artist, to determine what details you're willing to lose. Like for me, it's not important to try and get details in the sky. There may have been clouds in the sky. I think that day it was pretty clear, blue sky. Well, it was a blue sky, but there were clouds. I think that's what the sky was. And because this image is not focusing on the sky, it's not important to me to get those details in the sky. What's most important to me are these people in the foreground. So I've gotten enough of the details back that I'm happy with them. So what can you tell me about this image? Yes, another one that is not quite in focus. Now, you would be surprised how many images aren't quite in focus, but you can still find ways to make them work depending on your application. More than likely, I wouldn't use this image for, say, an exhibition, but for sharing on social media or for sharing in an environment like this, where I'm talking about what you can and cannot do to improve an image that's not well focused, or well focused in my opinion, um, it's a perfect example. And street photography is spontaneous. Every image is not going to be perfectly in focus unless I guess you have a flash, a very powerful flash, and you're really getting in people's faces with it. There is a photographer whose work consists of that. I don't remember his name, but I do remember seeing his work and feeling very bad for the people that he photographed, because he would literally just get in the faces of perfect strangers on the street and get a shot. It was basically a jump shot. He would get a shot of them looking surprised to find this camera flashing brightly in their face. That's not my style of photography. So, for the most part, you're not going to see those kinds of photos from me. I used to do a lot more jump scare photos like that when I was a kid, but over time I stopped doing them because I realized I don't like it when someone does that to me. I would generally do it to people who I knew and who I knew had a good sense of humor. Um, but for the most part, I stopped doing it because a lot of people do not like that. And frankly, I don't blame them, and I'm one of them. I try to live by the golden rule. All right, so we already know that this photo isn't as well focused as I would have preferred for it to be, but I'm going to keep it anyway. This is not what I would consider a tourist slash polished area. We're everyday people that live here. We're going about our daily lives. We're stopping to cash our paychecks. We're stopping at the fast food joint in the middle of the block. We're stopping at the fruit vendor while we're on our way home from work because, oh, they have pears there and we weren't able to find any in the supermarket up the street. That's everyday life in this neighborhood. And everyday life in this neighborhood does not consist of crisp, clean, sterile lines. It consists of people in motion doing their thing. So that's what this image represents to me. This one I made specifically because of the bike, the motorized bike on the sidewalk. So let's get some blacks in here. Now this one isn't perfectly in focus, but I like that because there's a bike moving on the sidewalk. It helps to capture the motion of the scene, like so. So that one's definitely a keeper for that reason and is most likely going on Patreon. I need to keyword it that to make sure I remember. This is a Team LLFA photo. Okay, was this the last one? That was the last one. Okay. Now all of these need to get the Bronx keyword because this was street photography done in the Bronx. Who's calling me? I do not know that number, so they can go away. And I will put my phone on vibrate because I don't like being interrupted. Okay, now to choose which ones go on Patreon and which ones do not. Patreon. I think the rest of them, oh, this one's definitely going on Patreon. And the rest of them will go on Instagram. So I'm going to export these for Patreon and export these 6 for Instagram. I think I had run out of photos for my Instagram feed anyway, so this is a good deal. This will carry me through 2 weeks of posts. Then I can look at the photos and see if they came out the way I want them. Make sure they've not exported with a whole bunch of glitches. This one is fine. This one is beautiful. This one is also beautiful. And this one is beautiful. Okay. So my Patreon images are fine. Now let's look at my images for Instagram. You hung up on something? You look like you are. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now it's exporting. Done. I can already see that this one has a glitch in it. I'll show you what I mean. Right here, there is a glitch. So I am going to re-export that photo. This is number 3. This is being exported for my Instagram feed. And I need to export the next one as well. Go back and check. Oh, you're really having a hard time today, aren't you? keep coming out with glitches. Okay, let's try this again. Because you still have a glitch in you. You still have a glitch in you. Wait, usually it fixes it. I don't know what it's... Oh, I see what happened. Okay, it's not overwriting the files. Well, let's fix that, shall we? So this is number 7. We'll get rid of the extra number 7s and the original one. And then for this one, we'll do number 3. So we'll get rid of those. Let's close this. And let's preview them again. Okay. This one came out perfect. 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 But you, I think you're going to Patreon. I don't think you're going, well, you might go to No, I think you're going to Instagram. This time this one came out perfect, as did this one. Alright, let me go back and look at my selections for Patreon. I don't want to duplicate a photo in both places. Okay, that's correct. Alright, so that was March 15th. Now I have been streaming for an hour, so I'm going to take a quick break, maybe for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll be back to do March 16th. Let me get rid of this. Oh, I've got some special ones from March 16th. Yes. Okay. We'll be back shortly. Okay, I am back. Let's move on to March 16th photos. On this day, I had an appointment in Manhattan. So, of course, I walked with my camera and got some shots I am very happy about. Now, I have 4 shots of this person. I think I'm going to opt for the ones that crop them at the waist, simply because there's less distortion. So every lens has some measure of distortion. My lens is an 24 to 105 f8. It's one of Canon's Pro Series lenses, so it has very little distortion compared to, say, a kit lens that would come with a camera body if you buy a camera kit. But there's still distortion in it. So in this case, this person's legs and foot would appear to be larger than the rest of their body because their lower legs and foot are very close to the lens, where their upper body is further away from the lens. So that's the effect that the distortion in glass will have. So I'm going to opt for the photos that crops them off at the knees so you don't see that distortion. And I was going to say I'm having a hard time choosing between this image and the image before it, but the image before it is more contrasty. I believe I'm going to opt for this image, but I'm going to flag both of them to look at more closely because, you never know what I may like the best. But right now I'm leaning more towards the first image because it's naturally more contrasty. And when I say naturally more contrasty, I mean because of the way the light was streaming, because of my camera settings, the shutter speed, the aperture, the image naturally came out contrasty. As much as I can do in camera without having to use software to achieve a particular look is better, just because it gives me more latitude once I do move to software. I've got all of the light information, or most of the light information, exactly the way I want it in the camera already. So the things that I do in the software are just tweaks here and there. And since I already have the light information the way I want it, I have a lot more latitude in terms of being able to change it to my advantage. If the light information isn't there, it just isn't there. So I could do graphics design type things in order to put other effects into the image. And it can be done, and it can be done well. However, I will say that's not my forte. I don't do graphic design. Now, someone who is skilled in graphic design would be able to do amazing things with Photoshop and overlays, or GIMP and overlays, and all kinds of things, and add those things to a photo and even make it look realistic. I'm not one of those people, so I'll leave those kinds of things for the experts in graphic design, or the very specialized retouching photographers. There's some incredible retouchers out there who can add all kinds of things to photos and make them look like they were originally there. I'm not that person, so I will leave that kind of artistry and magic to them, and I will stay in my lane and do my best to capture all of the light information that I want in camera so I don't have to do it in software. Now, I like this image just because it's shot in profile. So I'm also going to flag that, and that one will likely go in my Instagram stories because stories disappear after 24 hours. So this image, the portrait image, is going to go in Patreon. But if I put this image the landscape image rather is going to go in Patreon. If I put this portrait image on my Instagram stories, people will see it, but they only have 24 hours to see it. After that, it's gone. I haven't decided whether I prefer that image in black and white or color either, so that's going to be a tough one. This is a nice environmental photo. Kind of environmental photos I like to make. It still shows that even though the subways are running and people are out and about, um, there aren't as many people out as there would have been pre-pandemic. I'm going to go with the first photo simply because I like this open space in the center where you can see the background. You can see that there are other people on the platform. On the second image, there are two people who are blocking that view. So it gives me more of a sense of claustrophobia, and that's not what I want. I want that sense of this open platform that's not full, and you have space to walk around. It, an image like this can be interpreted very differently than an image like this. Now, if I was looking for more of that sense of there are more people around than before, feeling a little bit claustrophobic, or feeling like, there's some people who are approaching who may get in my personal space, then I would choose this image. So it's all about whatever my intention is. The same image, though, can be interpreted in many different ways, depending on the viewer. Huh. I'm going to take a second look at this image. At first, I wasn't too taken with it, but there's some interesting stuff going on here with this person that is viewable seemingly through the moving train. So I'm definitely going to take another look at that one. And this one, okay, overall, I like this image better than this one. This one crops off the woman in the foreground, which, I can crop her out entirely. That's not an issue. Like I said, it depends on my intention and what I want to show. This shot I find interesting because of the moving train and how you can see the person on the opposite platform through. There was there's a gap between the cars, and so because of the way this was captured, you can see the other person. Where this one I like because you get the shot of a moving train and a person standing on this platform minding their business, waiting for the train to arrive on this platform. So I don't know which one I like best, so I will flag both of them. I'll probably end up sharing both of them for different reasons. Okay, this one I'm gonna pass. It's out of focus. It's not really speaking to me, so I just won't even bother with this one. Same with this. I think I was looking at the space between the two cars, but I didn't do a good job of focusing here. Or this could be camera shake. What was my shutter speed? My shutter speed was 1/6 of a second. So the problem here was camera shake. I was shooting at ISO 2000, an aperture of 5.6, a kind of like 85 millimeter. That's getting towards telephoto range. So camera shake is going to be far more obvious because the focal length is much longer than, say, 50 millimeters or 24 millimeters. So this one I'm going to bypass for those technical reasons. I would have benefited from a higher ISO. Um, but then I would have had to contend with grain, which I wasn't sure I wanted. So I'll just leave that photo. This one, however, came out nice and sharp. I was coming out of a basement office and liked the contrast of the wrought iron railings and the handrails coming up out of the basement office, heading up to sidewalk level. I'll definitely will be taking a closer look at that one. Even though developers have definitely moved in and taken over a lot too much of the real estate of New York City, some old fashioned stores and storefronts remain, and Cove Brothers looks like one of those. That's why I photographed their storefront. So I like this shot, and I also like this next one that shows two workers, MTA workers, in their safety gear walking towards the shop. This is a good New York City street photography image, where this previous one is a good New York City architectural image. So they serve two different purposes. They give two different messages. Street photography in New York City, I love it. I love it. Just people living their lives, walking down the street, minding their business. This is the stuff that everyday life is made of, and it's the stuff that we're so conditioned to overlook. We don't see the beauty in it. It's boring because we see it every day. There's nothing special about it because who are these people? And instead, we're encouraged to look at celebrities and entertainers and study their lives and follow them on social media and try to meet them and try to talk to them. This is so much more attainable. Just regular life. And this is so much more prominent in your life than celebrities are. So while the escapism is nice, there is a time and place for escapism, don't get me wrong. Living in everyday life can be tiring. You know, we have problems, we have stresses. We need a way to escape those things. And celebrity culture, partaking in celebrity culture, can be a way of escaping those things. And we all need some form of escape. And then when we're refreshed, then we can come back to everyday life. But there are some of us, like myself, who we just find so much joy in just looking at everyday life and relating to everyday life. You know, now that's not to say that I haven't studied celebrities and been really intensely interested in celebrities. You know, there I've had my celebrity crushes and I've had celebrities that I wanted to know every single thing about them and every time an interview would come up, then I would want to see the interview and want to read about their life and want to try and communicate with them on social media. You know, so I've done that before. That's not where I'm at this phase in my life. So I leave that for the other people. I try not to criticize it too harshly just because I understand the appeal and it has appealed to me at times in my life. And I believe in letting people like things. You know, if someone's not harming themselves or harming other people by liking something or participating in something, there's really no reason for me to come down on it and harsh their mellow and make it seem like it's no big deal or like, oh, you should be spending your time and energy on something else. You know, I don't appreciate it when people do that to the things that I like, so I try not to do that to other people. And I've been that person in the past who has done that, you know, for whatever reason. You know, maybe I was jealous, or maybe I just didn't understand how important the thing was to the other person. But when you know better, you do better. So I know better, and now I do better. And that's why I enjoy focusing on shooting everyday life as I move through New York City, because it's there around me all the time. It's relatable. I can actually reach out and touch it. I can see it. It's not this big mystery hidden behind bodyguards and roped off entrances, and I don't need a VIP pass in order to get to it. All I have to do is step outside my door, and it's what makes up 99% of my life. So, why not find pleasure in what's around me all the time instead of trying to live vicariously through someone else? So that's my take on it. That's why I generally do not photograph entertainers. I have done event photography, and I have enjoyed it, and I intend to do it again. You know, when I get the opportunities, I do enjoy doing event photography, and I have photographed a couple of entertainers. But the bulk of my focus is on celebrating just the ordinary beauty of everyday life. Like here, you know, came out of my apartment, I'm walking to the subway, and there's someone having a photo shoot on the corner. You know, I don't know what this photo shoot was for. I don't know if they're a fashion person, you know, if they're in the fashion industry, or if they're doing a branding shoot for their own business, you know, personal portraits. I don't know, but this is everyday life. Someone just out on a street corner in New York City with their photographer having a photo shoot in front of a very interesting, colorful wall. You know, and images like this. Just, you know, you got three folks crossing the street together. They're living their life. You know, who are they? I have no idea. Just like they don't know who I am. But you know what? These are the people who I encounter in my everyday life, and I enjoy taking photos of them in their environment. I guess it would be easy to focus on things like the architecture all the time. You know, the stuff that people are used to seeing when they think about photos of New York City. We don't really focus so much on the average New Yorker just moving through the city that they call home. It's not a tourist destination. It's where we live, and where we love, and where we eat, and where we drink, and where we just walk around the block in order to get a breath of fresh air. And photographing that has a lot of meaning for me. This photo, I'm not sure, but I mean, I like the photo because it has a lot of layers to it. I would have liked to had more of the person in front of me in the frame, um, but you know that wasn't possible. This is street photography. You get what you get. And I certainly am not going to stop in the middle of crossing a very busy thoroughfare in New York City and try to get the perfect composition. I really like my life, so I kept it moving as I shot. Okay, so I've went through and I've culled all of the photos, chosen the ones I want to work with. Out of the 20, I have selected 14. Now, I'm not going to work with all of them. There's some duplicates here that I will not, yeah, I don't think I'll be editing all the duplicates, but like I said, this photo I like because of the contrast. I like because of the way the light is coming through the window. So let's hit the sharpening. And I'd like to make this one black and white. And if you notice, once I made it black and white, it seemed darker. So I'm going to bump the sharpening up just a touch. And then I'm going to start bumping up the exposure. Now look at that light. That is gorgeous. I don't even need to add vignetting to this photo because the way the light was coming in behind them naturally adds a vignette. And let me keyword this. So this one is definitely going on Patreon. So if you are not a member of Team LLFA on Patreon, go there and join. I put the link in the chat. This one might end up on April's postcard. I'm going to be honest with you. I love this shot. Now this one, I may leave color because I like these 3 different shades of blue. There's the blue in there, there's the blue in her jacket, the blue in her skirt, and the blue in the seat. And then of course there's blue in the subway map. If I made this black and white, then I would lose that detail. So in this case, the color is not distracting. The color actually brings together different elements of the image. That is a very good reason to leave this in color. Let me see what the sharpening does. So this is not completely in focus, but it's in focus enough that it's still a lovely image. So I'm playing around with the sharpening, you know, taking the sharpening to 0, taking it to the max of 400, and then finding a nice balance somewhere in the middle so that the edges are not too contrasty but also not too soft. And that's how we end up with this. Let's warm up the temperature a little bit. Now this is something that I haven't done on the other photos. So the warmth, it was very subtle, just a touch, but just enough to make the light look not quite so cold. This was not a cold day. It was a warm day. It's the middle of March, but she's just wearing a denim jacket, just like I believe I was that particular day. So I warmed up the light just a little bit because blue tends to be a cold color. So made it a little bit more, made the light a little bit more yellow. And let's bump the exposure up some. And again, I'm not even going to have to add vignetting because the light, the sunlight streaming through the window adds a natural vignette. Let's see what happens if we bump up the blacks, get a little bit more contrast, just a little bit. Now, I've learned I don't have to be heavy-handed. When you look at this, the way the edges of the book are lit. What's she reading anyway? The Something Investigation by Kamel Daoud. Interesting. This is a beautiful, beautiful shot. It's one of my favorites of the year. Now I'm going to crop this a touch. I'm not getting rid of much of the photo. Crop it a touch just so that she feels a little bit more of the frame. There we go. This is gorgeous. It really is. This one, though, is going to go on Instagram. Now, I don't put all of my less than perfect images on Instagram because then why would people want to check out my Patreon and pay to become a part of Team LLFA or pay to purchase any of my images if everything on Instagram was less than perfect? So I do share some of the exquisite photos on Instagram, and this will be one of them. I love the lighting, everything. This one I just may have to print. This would actually be a lovely canvas print. I think I want a little bit more exposure. There it is. Yes. And again, let me see if I can crop this just a touch. Just so that they'll fill more of the frame. Yes. Yes, I love it. Okay, so the color version you will see on my Instagram account. And this one's going to go in my Instagram stories. So I want to crop it for 16 by 9. And I can really fill the frame with them on this one because I'm dealing with that distortion with their lower leg being closer to the lens than their upper body. So I can afford to do a little bit more cropping on this one. Oh, the near salt investigation. I wonder what that's about. And let's see, let's sharpen up those edges a little bit more. That's too much. That's too much because I was getting distortion in the edges of their face covering. Right. Oh, lovely. Lovely. And this is going to go in my stories. And also tag it as social media. Did I tag the other ones as street photography? I did. Okay. Excellent. Next. Yes, this is my subway platform image. Sharpen, please. Thank you. Black and white, please. And I need to straighten this image. I'm not going to crop it. This is an environmental shot. And I want all of the elements. The person on the right side of the frame that's slightly blurry, who's walking down the platform, the stairs in the background, the people in the foreground. I want all of it. So I'm going to keep it. Done. Yes, thank you. This could stand to be straighter. Now, because of the distortion in lenses, it can be hard sometimes to get images straight. Finding that with this one, but it's straight enough. I'm picky. I know. Well, you need to bump up the exposure on this one. You see how in the histogram, the bulk of the histogram is over against the left side. That means most of the light information is over on the darker end of the scale. We want to add some light to this. So let's slide the exposure slider to the right, bump up the exposure, and there, now it looks lighter. The light information is more evenly distributed across the graph instead of being bunched over closer to the left-hand side of the graph. Yeah, that's all I want to do with this one. I haven't decided yet. Well, this one will probably go on Instagram, I think. Right now, I have a decent backlog of images that can go on Patreon. So this one will probably go on Instagram. Oh, yes. Oh, this is that interesting shot. Okay. Okay, we're gonna have to do a little bit of tweaking on this one. Let's straighten it up some. Sharpen it. Bump up the exposure. Sliding the exposure slider to the right. And let's crop it. I don't want to crop out the sign entirely because that's what gives us a sense of place. Yeah, I like this. I like this. Maybe we can bump that up and then increase the blacks to get a little bit more contrast, but not too much. Now these fluorescent lights are a little bit distracting, but it is what it is. I don't want to do graphics design stuff to get rid of them. And now we can see the passing train, and we can also see the person on the other platform, which is weird and wonderful all at once. This one may go on Instagram as well. Because I have captured this person before, and I also have captured this passing train, I'm going to pass on this photo. Here we are. Let's see what this looks. Okay, yes, this is definitely a black and white photo. Sharpening is our friend, and so is increasing the blacks. Just a touch, so we get that nice contrast, but I don't want it to be too heavy-handed. And increase the exposure just a little bit. Get a little bit more light in these shadowy areas at the bottom of the stairs. I like how I exposed this. It looks amazing. This is going to be under studies. This is a patterns and texture study and also a light study. Because I think it was the light that captured my eye first, then the textures and patterns from the smoothness of the concrete, the pattern of the brick, and contrasting that with the pattern of the wrought iron and the handrails. That's definitely a shareable image. I may let that one go for my blog. This one is going on my blog. And I'm going to leave it in color because I want to preserve the colors of the sign. Since the focus in this image is the storefront, I want to preserve the storefront. Let's bump the vibrance up just a little bit. That's going to make the colors pop more. They're looking a little bit washed out, straight out of camera. Let's make the light a little bit warmer. It was looking a bit too cool for my taste in the shadows. I'm thinking, let me see what happens if I do more exposure. Yeah, it needed a little bit more light. So I increased the exposure a little bit more. And what would vignetting do? Vignetting would be amazing. Yes, it would. Let's increase the size of the vignette, slide it a touch to the left, and took the strength back up. This is without the vignette. This is with the vignette. That is wonderful. Street photography, most definitely. This is, oh, building, because this is architectural. Okay, I don't have blog, but this one I want for my blog. So before I forget, I'm going to export it to that folder. So this is New York City, and we're going to export this for my blog. And now let me look at it to see if it exported well. I'm just checking off camera for a bit, just for a second, to make sure it didn't have any glitches in it, and it does not. So this will go on my blog. Okay, next image. See, how many more do I have to go through? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more images. Okay, 6 more images, and then I'll call it a day. Now this one is going to be black and white. This is a street photography shot. Well, actually, I may have spoke too soon. So if I take off the black and white, these people's safety gear draws the viewer's eye. Then there's a hardware store in the background, you know, people doing work. The two seem to mesh together very well. People who have safety gear, who are doing some kind of construction work because they have hard hats on, juxtaposed with a hardware store, a traditional hardware store in Midtown Manhattan. I think making this a black and white photo makes that juxtaposition a lot less obvious. So I'm going to keep this a color photo. So let's make some adjustments. We're going to increase the exposure because it was a little bit too dark for my taste. We're going to warm up the lighting. It looks a little bit too cool for me. I add a slight, very slight orange hue to, reddish hue to the light, and let's bump up make the colors a little bit more vivid. Not too much though, because I'm not trying to make a cartoon. I'm just trying to enhance what's already in the photo. No cropping, but a vignette could definitely help. Yes, it does. And it's perfect the way it is. Okay, this is, I keyworded street photography. Oh, oh. My computer just switched to dark mode and it threw me for a bit of a loop. It is 7 p.m. Do you know where your children are? I grew up in the 70s, so 70s and 80s, so I remember hearing that on a regular basis. Okay, so this image is done. I'm going on close to 2 hours, so yeah, I'll call it a day when I'm done with these images. Hello. Let's sharpen and straighten first of all. Hi, I see you looking in my general direction. Were they looking right at my lens? Let's see. Right, they were just looking in my general direction. Now we're going to crop just a little bit. Can't get away with too much because of how much I had to straighten it. Hang on, let's fit this. Okay, that's better. Now I can bring this down some. I'd like to get rid of the edge of this cart or shelter or whatever it is over here on the right hand side. Okay, that's better than it was. That's a lot better than it was. I like this photo because of the way I have it focused. There are layers to it. So you see sharply the person in the foreground, and then you can see there are people in the background. They're not as in focus as a foreground, and that's deliberate. I believe my aperture was set to 5.6. No, this was f8. So if I had wanted the whole scene in focus, I would have had to been shooting at f11, f16. But f8 works fine to kind of give some separation between the foreground and the background. Let's adjust the exposure, like it a little brighter. Slide it away from the left-hand side of the histogram just a touch. And warm. That was a little bit too much warming. Right like that. Street photography, of course. This definitely needs straightening. That is no big deal. We're going to slide the straightening slider to the left. Are you looking in disbelief at how much parking in Manhattan costs? I do not blame you. I would be as well. This is why I try not to drive in Manhattan. But sometimes it simply cannot be avoided, and you're stuck paying these extortionist prices just to park for 20 minutes. And you can see this isn't perfectly in focus, but that's fine. That's fine. We're not going for perfection here. We're going for realistic and reasonably in focus. Shooting for perfectionism has probably killed more creative projects than gatekeepers have. And the gatekeepers are bad enough. I think this is going to be an Instagram post. Do I want it in black and white? I do want it in black and white. I like it in black and white. It's a little bit fuzzy around the edges because it's not as sharp. Not as focused as I would prefer it, but I still like it. I still like it enough to share it. Now, I am not expecting visitors, so I'm going to assume that was somebody with fat fingers buzzing someone else's bell, and we will not answer the door. Okay, do I want this to be black and white? I do, because the colors on this wall definitely distract from the action that I was capturing. And there will be some cropping going on here. We have to enable crop first. And we're going to bring down top of the image. We want to fill the frame with the photographer and their subjects. Like so. Curious, how does this look in color? It looks okay. But I prefer it in black and white. Now the interesting thing about this image, the shadows are very harsh. This was just after noon, so it was sometime between 12 and 12:30. And that time of day, the shadows are going to be very harsh. Um, Neither good nor bad. It's just the position of the sun at that time of day. And that's why you end up with the shadow on the wall, the shadow um, directly in front of the photographer here. But that's why, in general, if you're going to do portrait photography, the rule of thumb is to not shoot in the middle of the day because you will end up with harsher shadows. But if that's what you're looking for your images, then that is the best time for you to shoot. There's really no right or wrong answer to any of this. It's all about artistic impression, yeah, artistic intent. So even things like focus. Wow, is the image perfectly in focus? Um, the image being perfectly in focus could completely ruin the message that the artist is trying to convey with the photo. So it just comes down to artistic intent. That's also why I tell people, and I know I've said it on the stream before, and I'll continue to say it, don't let your lack of an expensive camera keep you from exploring photography if that's what you're interested in. There are people who get paid photography gigs or who have exhibitions based off of camera phone images. First of all, camera phones have come a very long way in the past, I would say uh, 10, 10 years. See, I first got a phone with a camera, I think in 2008. So, like in the past 10 to 15 years, camera phones have come a very long way from where they were. You can make decent images with a camera phone. That being said, camera phones do have their limits. The fact of the matter is, every camera has its limits. Okay, my camera body alone, if I were to buy it brand new, is probably around $2,500. It has limits. There are certain situations it can handle well. There are certain situations it cannot handle well, like low light, for example. My camera does not do very well in low light, even though it's a very expensive camera body. It does far better in low light than, say, my camera phone does, simply because it has a much larger sensor. So even if it is low light, it can capture a lot more light information and a lot more detail than a camera phone can. A camera phone's sensor is very small. A DSLR sensor is about the size of a postage stamp for those of us who are familiar with and still use postal mail or snail mail, as people liked to say back in the early 2000s. But the point is, yes, it's a professional camera. I mean, it's part of Canon's professional camera line, the lens as well. So yes, it's a professional camera. Yes, it costs thousands of dollars. Yes, it has limits. Every camera has limits. The point is to figure out what are the limits of your particular equipment and learn how to work within those limits. So if all you have is a camera phone, you don't have to say, oh, I can't take decent photos because all I have is a camera phone. No, you can take decent photos. Just figure out under what circumstances your camera phone can take decent photos. Most likely it's going to be um, in bright light, whether you're outside on a sunny day or whether you are indoors with bright lighting. Camera phones can work well in low light under certain conditions, as long as you're not, say, zooming in with trying to use the zoom pinch, pinch to zoom. Don't use your zoom. Don't use pinch to zoom on your camera phone if you want nice detailed images, because the camera phone sensor is too small to capture those kinds of details. And what you're going to end up with, especially if you were taking the photo in low light, you're going to end up with a very grainy photo. It's not going to show much, if any, of the detail you were really hoping to capture, and you're going to be very frustrated. So learn the limits of whatever camera you have and then shoot within those limits. And I promise you that you are going to be able to make exceptional photos as your understanding of photography improves, even with a camera phone. I mean, there are people who make photos by with pinhole cameras. A pinhole camera is nothing more than a box that you poke a pinhole through in the front, and then you put photo paper against the back wall of the box, and you expose it to the light. You open up the pinhole to expose the photo paper to light for a certain amount of time, depending on the environment that you're in. And people create photos using pinhole cameras, and they'll have whole exhibits, and will sell their art for however much they're able to command based on their name, because it's more about your name than about the actual art you produce. That's a conversation for another time. um, but people are able to have whole exhibits based off of pinhole camera photography, made out of simple cardboard boxes and a sheet of photo paper. So don't let your lack of very expensive equipment keep you from exploring photography and figuring out what you can do with your camera, and just enjoying the art of going out with a camera and photographing your surroundings or the events that you go through, your friends, your family, whatever it is that you want to photograph. The best camera to have is the one that's on you at the time. So just learn to use it. Learn what that camera can and cannot do and work within the limits of it. And you'll have a great time. And it's far better than sitting on the sidelines wishing that you had a different set of camera equipment. I have literally, I've been in a number of photography groups over the years, and I have been in photo groups with people who literally have thousands of dollars of camera equipment. I mean, they'll have expensive camera bodies, 2 and 3 different professional lenses, flashes, all kinds of equipment they're carrying around in their knapsack or whatever. And they make photos that you could have made with a point and shoot camera, because basically that's all they're doing. They're pointing the camera and shooting, or spray and pray, as you call it. You hold down the shutter button and make a whole bunch of photos and hope and pray that at least one of them comes out nice. You don't need $5,000 of camera equipment to make those kinds of photos. You can get a really cheap point and shoot digital camera for 50 bucks and make those kinds of photos because they didn't put the thought into how to compose the shot, the lighting of the shot, anything like that. But then there are people who they have a $30 point and shoot camera, $40 point and shoot camera, and they make the most thought provoking, beautiful images with those cameras. Case in point, here in the Bronx, we have a place called the Bronx Documentary Center. And they have a couple of free programs. One of them is the Bronx Junior Photo League, and one is the Bronx Senior Photo League. And what those programs do is put cameras into the hands of school age kids for the Junior Photo League and senior citizens for the Senior Photo League. And they teach them things like composition, how to put together a series of photos in order to tell a story. They talk about photojournalism and the things that you can do with your photos to document an event or document an environment and what have you. And these are not expensive cameras by any stretch of the imagination. And the juniors and the seniors in these two programs put together stunning photos and photo stories with those simple cameras because they learn what the limitations of their gear are. They learn how to tell a story, and then they use their gear, whatever gear they have, within those limitations in order to tell those stories. So I say all of that to encourage you to use your camera gear the same way. Photography is something that you're interested in. I'm going to find the URL for the Bronx Documentary Center. Here we go. And I'm going to put that in the chat for you. The Bronx Documentary Center. And I want you to go to that website. Hang on. So we're done with my images here. I'm getting ready to sign off, but before I do, I want to show you the Bronx Documentary Center website so you can see for yourself. Just give me a second to adjust the size of the window. Okay, so I put the URL in the chat. This is the Bronx Documentary Center. And they do exhibitions, they do events. It's primarily focused on photojournalism, not fine art photography. So if you're interested in fine art photography, the programs that they have here are more about photojournalism. However, there's a large crossover between what is photojournalism and what is fine art photography. Depends on how you want to look at it. So if you appreciate good photography, this is still a wonderful place to visit. So if you're here in the Bronx, you can visit them. Otherwise, you can visit their website here. And under their education section, so they have the Bronx Junior Photo League, and this is middle through high school students, and it's a free program. And they put cameras in the hands of these kids and teach them about photojournalism and photo book making and basically how to tell a story with the photos that they make. The same with the Bronx Senior Photo League, and this is a free photography program for seniors in the Bronx, and they do the same thing. And from time to time, the BDC will have exhibitions based off of the league's photos. You will be amazed at the kind of art that these people are able to do simply by using whatever camera they have and making photos. You know, if you look at this photo here for the Bronx Senior Photo League, these are not expensive cameras that they're holding. They're point and shoot cameras. And the photos that I've seen these seniors do are touching and heartwarming and just absolutely beautiful. So, again, don't let your lack of a super duper expensive camera keep you from exploring photography if photography is something that you're interested in. Use what you have and you'll continue to learn and grow. And at some point in time, if you get to the point where there are things that you do want to be able to do, but you're not able to do them with the gear that you have, then you can seriously consider looking for something that's going to be a little bit more expensive, but that will give you the latitude that you need in order to create the images that you have in mind. Well, that is going to be it for me. I have been streaming for about 2 hours, a little bit over 2 hours. And it's been a lot of fun to discuss with you my editing process, my culling process, my feelings about photography overall, and also to encourage you to get out your camera, whatever camera that might be, and go out there and have fun just photographing your everyday environment. Slow down and enjoy the beauty in what you see around you every single day. Because, I mean, if you're going to see it every day, why not appreciate it, you know? All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I enjoyed sitting here chatting with you, and I will see you next time. Make sure that you watch my social media. You can find the links to my social media on lotuslandfineart.com, and watch out for my social media for announcements of when I will next be live. You enjoy the rest of